Alternative medicine has always had its devotees, and at the turn of the 20th century, fasting was all the rage. In 1900, Dr. Edward H. Dewey published The No Breakfast and the Fasting Cure. He claimed that every disease that afflicts mankind was caused by more or less habitual eating in excess of the supply of gastric juices. Then, in 1908, Linda Hazzard published Fasting for the Cure of Disease, but she took her methods a little far, using her beautiful treatment to starve some 15 patients to death, while simultaneously robbing them of everything they owned. Nevertheless, she maintained, death in the fast never results from deprivation of food, but is the inevitable consequence of vitality sapped to the last degree by organic imperfection. Born Linda Burfield in Carver County, Minnesota, in 1867, she married at 18 and had 2 children, but left to study under Dewey and train as an osteopathic nurse in Minneapolis. It seems she killed her first patient while purporting to be a doctor in 1902, around the time her divorce became final. After the coroner determined that death was caused by starvation, he tried to have her prosecuted, but as she was not a licensed medical practitioner, she could not be held responsible. However, it was noted that the victim's valuable rings were missing. She then married Samuel Chrisman Hazzard, a West Point graduate who had been drummed out of the military for embezzling army funds. A swindler, drunk, and womanizer, he had been married twice before. Having failed to divorce one of his wives, he was sentenced to 2 years for bigamy. Once he was released, they moved to Washington State to set up a sanatorium at Olalla, across the Puget Sound from Seattle, at a place called Wilderness Heights, which locals renamed Starvation Heights, after malnourished patients escaped and came into town begging for food. Taking the cure. The first known fatality there was Daisy Maud Haglund, a 38-year-old Norwegian woman whose parents were immigrants and the owners of Alki Point, the original settlement that became Seattle. Daisy died on the 26th of February 1908 after 50 days of fasting. She left a 3-year-old son named Ivar, who would, ironically, go on to open the successful Seattle-based seafood restaurant chain that bears his name. However, the post-mortem determined she had stomach cancer and would have died anyway. Other victims soon followed Lenora and Ida Wilcox in 1908, and Blanche B. Tyndall and Viola Heaton in 1909, while New Zealander Eugene Stanley Wakelin was reported to have committed suicide by shooting himself in the head while fasting under Hazzard's care. Hazzard had been appointed administrator of his estate and drained it of funds. As the son of a British lord, it turned out he was not as rich as she expected him to be, and she wired his lawyer asking for more money to pay the mortuary fees. Later, the British vice-consul in nearby Tacoma, Lucien Agassiz, speculated that he had been shot by the Hazzards out of frustration at his poverty. Mrs. Maud Whitney succumbed in 1910. Civil engineer Earl Edward Erdman also took the cure in 1910 and died of starvation after 3 weeks. The Seattle Daily Times headline read, "Woman MD kills another patient." After his death, Erdman's diary was recovered. It recorded that his daily diet consisted of mashed soup or a cup of strained tomato broth, or else a small orange or 2. He was in pain, slept badly, sweated profusely, and suffered a fluctuating heartbeat. He died shortly after being hospitalized on the 28th of March while awaiting a blood transfusion. The cure did not just consist of fasting. There were daily enemas, taking hours and using 24 pints of water, and patients were given scalding baths. Hazzard would also massage her patients, repeatedly hitting her fist against their forehead and back, screaming "eliminate" while they screamed in pain. But patients kept on coming. Frank Southard, a partner in a law firm, and C.A. Harrison, publisher of Alaska Yukon magazine, died under Hazzard's care in 1911, along with Ivan Flux, an Englishman who had come to America to buy a ranch and who had fasted for 53 days. During his treatment, Hazzard got control of his cash and property. When he died, his family was told he only had $70 to his name. The authorities tried to step in when Lewis Ellsworth Rader, a former legislator and publisher of a magazine called Sound Views, began wasting away. He even owned the land Hazzard's sanatorium was built on. Hazzard treated him at the nearby Outlook Hotel in 1911, and health inspectors tried to convince him to leave, but he refused. Hazzard spirited him away to a secret location where the authorities could not question him. At 5 feet 8 in tall, Rader weighed less than 100 pounds, 7 stone or 45 kilograms, when he died. The health director of Seattle had been powerless to step in, as due to a grandfather loophole in state law, Hazzard was licensed as a doctor, and her patients were willing participants. Given the fad for quackery, she had many loyal followers. She had a commanding personality and seemed to hypnotize her patients with her booming voice and flashing dark eyes. Her patients were afraid of her and couldn't bring themselves to disobey. There was talk that her command of spiritualism, theosophy, and the occult gave her the ability to gull people into starving themselves to death. But the health director kept an eye on her. If she had treated any children, he said he would have stepped in. Hypochondriac sisters. The case that forced the authorities to intervene was that of Claire and Dorothea Dora Williamson, the orphaned daughters of a wealthy British Army officer. They had been staying at the Empress Hotel in Victoria, British Columbia, when they saw an ad for Hazzard's book. When they ordered it, they received a brochure promoting Hazzard's Institute of Natural Therapeutics in Olalla. The two sisters were hypochondriacs and fancied they were suffering from a variety of minor ailments. Dora complained of swollen glands and rheumatic pains, while Claire thought she had a dropped uterus. They were already great believers in alternative medicine and had given up both meat and corsets in an attempt to improve their health. Imagining the institute was set in rolling countryside, they set off for Seattle to sign up for treatment without telling their family, who disapproved of their health faddism. Arriving in February 1911, they were told that the sanatorium in Olalla was not quite finished. Instead, Hazzard set them up in the Buena Vista apartment on Seattle's Capitol Hill, where she began feeding them a broth made from canned tomatoes, 8 fluid ounces a day, no more, which was not enough to sustain life. They were given enemas in the bathtub, which was covered in canvas to support them when they fainted. Meanwhile, Dr. Hazzard offered to store their jewelry and real estate deeds in her safe. By the time the institute was ready to receive them in April, they were down to 70 pounds, 5 stone or 32 kilograms, and delirious, so ill that they had to be transported there in ambulances and a private launch. There was clearly something amiss with them. Their childhood nanny, Margaret Conway, was visiting family in Australia when she received a mysterious telegram on the 30th of April, summoning her to visit them in Olalla. 3 weeks later, she set sail from Sydney, arriving in Vancouver on the 1st of June, where she was met by Sam Hazzard. On the way to Dr. Hazzard's office in Seattle, he broke the bad news that Claire was dead. As Dr. Hazzard explained it, the culprit was a course of drugs administered to Claire in childhood. These had shrunk her internal organs and caused cirrhosis of the liver. Claire, it seems, had been much too far gone for the beautiful treatment to save her. Meanwhile, Dora had gone insane. Margaret Conway was taken to the Butterworth mortuary to see Claire's embalmed corpse, but did not recognize her. The hands, shape of her face, and color of her hair seemed to belong to someone else. She weighed just 40 pounds, less than 3 stone or 18 kilograms. Dora was a human skeleton weighing 50 pounds, 3.5 stone or 22 kilograms, when Margaret got to visit her in Olalla. Living in a rough-hewn shack, there was so little flesh on her that it was painful to sit down. She begged Margaret to take her away, but changed her mind the next day, saying the cure was doing her a world of good. Margaret stayed with Dora, hoping to convince her to leave. She also tried to sneak some rice or flour into her broth. Although the patients were usually kept in isolation, they were allowed to mingle for the 4th of July celebrations. 2 of them approached Miss Conway, saying they were prisoners and begging her to get them out. There was little Margaret could do. Dr. Hazzard had been appointed the executor of Claire's considerable estate, as well as Dora's guardian for life. Dora had also signed over her power of attorney to Samuel Hazzard. Meanwhile, the Hazzards had helped themselves to Claire's clothes, household goods, and an estimated $6,000 worth of diamonds, sapphires, and other jewels. Margaret noticed that Dr. Hazzard had the temerity to wear Claire's silk dressing gown and her favorite hat. The serpent takes the stand. As a lowly servant, Margaret did not feel that she could confront the Hazzards. Instead, she contacted the sisters' Uncle John Herbert in Portland, Oregon, who came to Seattle and paid $1,000 to free Dora. Herbert and Vice Consul Agassiz set about investigating the goings-on at Hazzard's sanatorium. They drew up a list of at least 12 other wealthy patients who had died there. Their death certificates listed starvation as the cause of death, except the ones signed by Dr. Hazzard. Agassiz put pressure on the authorities in Kitsap County to prosecute Hazzard. They said they did not have the money, but the recovering Dora Williamson said she would pay. On the 15th of August 1911, Linda Hazzard was arrested and charged with murder. The headline of the Tacoma Daily News read, "Officials expect to expose starvation atrocities. Dr. Hazzard depicted as fiend." Breaking the news of the dead heiress and the walking skeletons of Olalla, it was suggested that Dr. Hazzard exercised some kind of black magic or mind control over her victims. The trial was held in the county court in Port Orchard, the county seat. One reporter cautioned people to avoid looking into the doctor's eyes in case she bewitched them. Another wrote, "Many accounts of the family's action declare that the woman asserts an iron will over all with whom she is thrown in contact, her powers ranging from the weakened patient at the fasting sanatorium to the husband." Dr. Hazzard said that she was being persecuted because she was a successful woman. This inspired suffragettes from across the Northwest and beyond. Hundreds flocked to the trial. One reporter counted 248 women in the line, the wives of Navy officers, society women, even an odd consortium of female private detectives. Linda Hazzard played to the crowd. I am a great believer in women and will defend members of my sex at all times, she told the press during a court recess. I would willingly place my fate in the hands of a jury of women at any time. She was up against men who opposed her natural cures and scorned her methods. I intend to get on the stand and show up that bunch, she told reporters. They've been playing checkers, but it's my move. I'll show them a thing or two when I get on the stand. However, her lawyer kept her off the stand. Natural cures and her methods were not on trial. Rather, it was alleged that Hazzard had killed Claire Williamson for money. Prosecuting attorney Thomas Stevenson called Hazzard a financial starvationist and a serpent who trod sly and stealthy, yet with all her craft left a trail of slime. He had a paper trail to prove it. He showed that Hazzard had written Claire's will, the last entry of Claire's diary, written on the day she died, had also been forged by Linda Hazzard. It said that Claire wanted Hazzard to have her diamonds. Other names in the natural health world offered their support during their trial. Henry S. Tanner, a doctor who fasted publicly for 40 days in New York City in 1880, agreed to testify in order to hold up the medical fraternity to the derision of the world. He was denied the chance. The judge also excluded patients who claimed that their treatment had been successful. However, John Ivar Haugland, widower of wife Daisy, testified that he had faith in Dr. Hazzard. He had even taken their son to her for treatment. Nevertheless, she was found guilty of manslaughter and sentenced to 2 to 20 years hard labor. An appeal failed. Meanwhile, it seems that Dr. Hazzard managed to starve 4 more patients to death. After she served 2 years in the state penitentiary at Walla Walla, she and her husband went to New Zealand, where she styled herself physician, dietitian, and osteopath, and published another book. After making a lot of money, she returned to Wallala in 1920, where she built a dream sanatorium, one with an autopsy room in the basement, and where she continued her starvation treatment. Although for some unfathomable reason she had been pardoned by the state governor in 1916, her medical license had been revoked, so she had to call it a school of health. It burnt down in 1935. By then she was in her 60s. Feeling unwell, she subjected herself to her own fasting treatment and became her own last victim in 1938.